lunch is ready. Baha called out to her twins, Koyal and Karo. She knew they had to be together, some way or the other, having fun, playing, doing some mischief, just like little children do. When Baha discovered that she is expecting twins, she knew what she wanted to call them. Two names, Koyal and Karo, that could always be taken together. Koyal and Karo, just like the two rivers. In the last 6 years, Baha had tried her best to nurture the Santhali in her two children. She knew that her Koyal and Karo were growing up miles away, very, 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 very far away from where she came from. They were growing up in London, and therefore she had tried her best to make them feel at home. And so she had told her all the many stories that she had grown up with. Baha looked out of the window, and there she could see her children playing with a flower pot. Koyal and Karo, always together, just like the rivers. The names of her children reminded her of days of the past, of when she was a little girl, when she sat on her grandfather's shoulders and went to see Koyal Nadi. Baha closed her eyes and she recalled. Baha, remember, we Adivasis love our jal, our jungle and our jameen. No matter where you go, always remember that you are a Santhali and you will always, always, always have a deep connect with this land. This is where you belong, okay? Little Baha had nodded her head. She didn't understand a word of what her grandfather said, but she didn't want to say that to him. What if he felt bad? Her grandfather and she, they sat beside Koyal Nadi, watching it flow by. Her grandfather had a gamcha. He opened it, and inside it, there was a fistful of khajari, puffed rice. The two shared the little snack, and the grandfather tested her with a kudum, a Santhali riddle. What was it? Gada gadate bati tapa, which loosely meant an upturned metal bowl buried in the river sand. And the moment she heard it, Baha said, "Tortoise, tortoise, tortoise." She was very good with riddles. Tortoise. And that's how the story began. The first story that her grandfather told her. Baha remembered that there was a courier which had come from India. She went and took it out. There were books which her cousin had sent from India. Koyal, Karo, come, 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 come. Look what I have for you. Koyal and Karo, they gushed inside and they went and hugged. Baha held up the book and said, look, this book has come from very, very, very far away. And this has a story which is very, very old. Quickly settle down and I will read you the book. The children quickly wolfed down their lunch and they sat down for Baha to tell them the story. Do you know, children, we Santhals believe that we come from the geese. A long, long, long time ago, when the world was young, the earth as we know it today was covered by only water. Everywhere that you could see, you would only see the rippling waves of the ocean. And there was no land. Thakur Jeev had created the Hans and the Hasil, the geese, who are our ancestors. And these geese, they flew across the sky, and they flew and they flew and they flew. No one knows how long did they fly. But there came a day when they got tired. And they looked for a place to land, but there was no land. There was only water and water and water. And so the geese, they got tired. Fatigued, tired, worn out. Hans and Hasil, they flew higher and higher and higher to go to Thakur Jeev. Thakur Jeev, the supreme God up there. And they said, you have given us life. We have been flying and now we are tired. We don't know where to land. Oh, there is nowhere. It's all water. Now, Thakur Jeev had not thought of it. So Thakur Jeev realized that he had to do something to correct this mistake. So he called all the other bongas, the other lesser gods, and said, well, we need to create earth. What shall we do? And all the bongas, they said, well, there is earth way below the sea. We should ask all the aquatic animals. There is the crab, there is the prawn, the alligator, the earthworm. They will help us. We should assign them the task of creating earth. And so Thakur Jeev said, very well. Sol Hako, Katkom, Lendit Kuwar and Tayan will create earth. And all the animals, they were very happy. They got together and said, oh, Thakur Jeev has given us this beautiful task to do. We know what to do. We know the earth is down below the ocean. We can lift it up just like this. They were very confident that they would do as Thakur Jeev had asked them to do. And they made their plans. It was Sol Hako, the prawn, who first said, I will do it. Don't you worry. Watch me. And he went deep down and he dug his 10 hands and his legs and he went up. But just as he let it go, the earth drifted down. Katkom said, let me do it. Katkom dug his claws and he carried the earth up to the surface. But just as he let them go, the earth drifted towards the bottom. The fishes got worried. First Sol Hako, then Katkom. The earth was not staying on top. That's when Tayan, the alligator, said, you all are all doing it wrong. We need lots of earth. So Tayan, the alligator, went down to the floor. He picked up as much earth as he could in his mouth. He dug his hands and his legs and he carried the earth and he swam higher and higher and higher. The ocean floor was dragging him down because he was heavy. And Tayan struggled as he swam higher. The fishes moved around him. They were scared. What if he couldn't reach the top? At last, Tayan reached at the top, but like with everyone else, the earth drifted down. And then it was the earthworm prince's turn. Lendet Kumar said, it's okay, I know what to do. I will fill up the earth in my mouth. So he filled up his mouth with as much earth that he could. He filled up his body and he went up to the surface and he let it go. But even the earthworm prince could not keep the water, the earth on top. Now everyone got worried. All the aquatic animals, they tried one after the other, sometimes together. But no matter what they tried, the earth refused to stay on top of the water. And then, suddenly, somebody remembered. There is Kachim Kuwar. We should go and ask his help. Kachim Kuwar, the tortoise, he has a shell on his back, and if he wants, he can help. When Kachim Kuwar heard the plan, he nodded his tortoise head slowly. He was ready to shoulder the weight of the earth on his back. The fish brought chains and reeds, and they tied his legs. Kachim Kuwar stood stoically on the water, on the floor. And then Lendet Kuwar, the earthworm prince, filled his back with earth. And slowly and slowly and slowly, the earth rose. In the middle of the ocean, there was a tiny island. Thakurji saw this from above and said, yes, I promised earth to Hans and Hasil, but it is not enough. So he caused a karam tree and sirom grass to grow. And then he filled up that little island with lots of vegetables. And when all the vegetation and the tree and the grass they grew, they made the earth firm and firmer. And now it was ready for Hans and Hasil to fly down and land on earth and build a nest and lay their eggs. They had a home called Earth. Earth, which rested on a tortoise's back. Wow! Is this story true? Ma, is this true? Koyal and Karo, they jumped up asking their mother. Baha said, well, if a Santhal believes it to be true, then this is true. I heard this story many years ago when I was a little girl, younger than you, and I still believe in it. Baha had vivid memories of her childhood. She remembers every year she got up on a train and they went across the country to their village in East India. Usually it was during the Sohrai festival. But there was this one time when they went home during the Baha festival. Her grandfather looked at her and said, Baha, my little Baha. That's when she learnt that her name meant flowers. Her grandfather told her many stories. Stories about their festivals, about their customs, about their rituals. And when she was young, to Baha, being a Santhali child, was all about knowing these colorful cultural festivals and the many fantastic stories that came from her grandfather. Her grandfather told her the history of the Santhals, of how they lived as a community, their practices, of how they lived within the forest and they respected it, how they had a deep connect with their nature, and everything else, but how they fought for the land, how they fought for the forest, how they fought for themselves. All these stories that came from her grandfather made Baha realize who she is. As she grew up, she learned that it was her father and her mother were the first in their family, in their village, to leave the village and go out to study. Her parents found a job in the city and they traveled around the country. And every year, they went back home. When Baha was small, home was Bihar. But by the time she grew up, home was Jharkhand. After her parents retired, they went back to their village in Jharkhand, whereas Baha traveled the world. She recalled when she went to college. People outside, they did not know much about Santals or the tribes, about their customs. They didn't even care. She wondered, okay, I lived in this world, connected, disconnected with my Santhal roots. They don't seem to know me at all. Once in a college function, she wore a Santhal sari and she went, and everyone looked at her very curiously. What has she done? Why is she wearing this? And that's when she realized that she needs to own her identity. She needs to tell people about her land, and she needs to tell them the stories that she heard. Today, looking at her children, telling that one story, she suddenly remembered that it's these same stories which made her who she is. As she grew up, sitting with her grandfather, sitting on the banks of Koyal Nadi, she heard the story of water and how the Santals love their water, how they worship the water, and how they fight for that water. She also heard the story of Koyal Nadi and how the Koyal and the Karo Nadi were born. And as she grew older, she also heard about the story of how the tribal community fought for the rivers, to keep them free, to keep them flowing. It was a resistance which was stronger than even their fight for independence. How could the tribals leave their land, their forests, their water and go away? This is what they were supposed to do. And it filled her with a sense of pride of where she came from. She realized that nobody else would talk about the forest and the water or the rivers if it wasn't the Adivasis. Baha kept thinking. The stories of her past, they kept flooding her mind. But now it was time for evening, for bedtime rather. And there was another book to be read. She went back to that envelope and took out the second book. This was perfect bedtime story for her Karo and Koyal. She settled down, the children settled down. They nudged closer to Baha. And her story began. This is the story about two children. This is a story about a brother and a sister. Their names were Karo and Koyali, just like you. Karo and Koyal didn't have their parents. They had died. They were orphans. And so it was their uncle, their maternal uncle and aunt, their mama and mommy, who took them home. Their mama was a very kind and generous man. He loved his sister dearly, and so his niece and his nephew were like his own children. He didn't have children of his own, but he did not mind it at all. To him, Karo and Koyal were like his own children, and he loved them a lot. But his wife, their mommy, was not as kind. In fact, she did not like it that their mama loved Karo and Koyal so much that he did not miss having his own children. And so she found ways to be mean to them. She was harsh, she was rude, and sometimes cruel. She didn't have any other choice. Once it was the Gomha Parab. The entire village was getting ready for the festivities. They cleaned their walls, they painted them. The girls wore their red and white beautiful Santhal saris, and the boys took out their tumdak and tamak to dance. Everyone was celebrating. Everyone except Karo and Koyal. Their mama called out and said, Karo, Koyal, I'm going to the market to get some chicken. I'm going to come back and we are going to cook it together for the feast. Okay? Wait for me. And he left. But mommy, she wasn't happy. She had just put the rice pot on the fire and she said, he's going to come and make chicken for his Bhagna and Bhagni. What about me? I wish they were not here. But what can I do? Let me see. So she called Karo and Koyal and said, you two, go to the field and work. That's what you should do. This is no holiday. Karo and Koyal picked up their tools and they walked towards the field. What could they do? It was the Gomha Parab, but mommy did not want them to stay at home. So they worked silently in the fields. There was no one around. The sun shone right above them. Chandobonga, the sun god, he saw the two children and he came and asked, why are you working? Today is Gomha Parab. Go home. It's a holiday. Karo and Koyal joined their hands and they told their story of how their mummy sent away. Chandobonga, the sun god, took pity on them. Said, this is not how it should be. So he blessed them to be turned into snakes and said, now you are free. You are free to go anywhere you want. No one can make you do what you don't want. Koyal and Karo, they prayed and they said, thank you. Well, then Mama came back from the market and he was looking for his Bhagna Bhagni and he said, where are they? His wife said, they are there in the fields. Go and get them home. Mama went towards the fields. Today is Gomha Parab. The children should not be in the fields working. He looked for them, but they couldn't see them anywhere. And then he saw his Bhagna Bhagni turned into snakes. They came to him and they wept. They were sad that their life with their mama was going to come to an end. They slithered away towards the gods, leaving the world as humans. But they were also happy that all their miseries of being orphan was going to come to an end. And so Karo and Koyal, they slithered beautifully through the lands of today's Jharkhand. They say the trails that the two snakes left filled up with water and they became the two rivers, Karo and Koyal. Karo and Koyal, even today, they flow through the land of Jharkhand. Baha closed the book and she thought, is this story true? Her children would have wanted to know. Koyal and Karo were now sleeping, their hands held together. Who knows whether this story is true or not? She recalled when she heard it for the first time, she believed it to be true. Who does these rivers belong to? To the people who live beside it, to the state, to the country? Who will protect them? Who will speak for the rivers? Baha went back to the two books and she looked at them. She held the books close to herself and she realized that these ancient stories which bound a community together are now children's stories. All she can do is just let the stories flow from herself to her children. Now, whether they believe in it or not is up to them. But then, who knows these stories? Only the Santals do, only the tribals do. But people outside them, they don't. Do they even believe in it? Who will speak for the rivers? Who will speak for the rivers? Who will stand up for the rivers? Will Karo and Koili be free forever? She doesn't know. Will the rivers live forever? She doesn't know. Baha closed her eyes and she searched for these answers. Answers which were perhaps hidden in some other story. She searched and she searched and she searched. But she didn't find any answer. Because the answer is not an easy one. Thank you. I want to say a special thank you to the makers of the two books. The first one is part of Santhal Creation Stories. This has been published by Adivani, and it's been written by Ruby Hembrom, who's a Santhal herself. Adivani is publishes tribal literature, and I believe the kind of literature that they have come up with, particularly this one and the other one, which is about how the Santhals come from the Geese, are very powerful books for not just for children, but anyone else who wants to know a little bit more or appreciate where do the Santhals come from and what is their story. And I would like to support Adivani thank Adivani for letting me use this title in this presentation. The other one is from Gurucharan Murmu. This book was written and illustrated by Gurucharan while he was in college, and it's been published by Eklavya Publications with support from Parag. And this is again a very beautiful story about how the two rivers were formed, and I would like to thank Gurucharan for letting me for allowing me to use the book for this presentation. These two stories come from Jharkhand, and that's the state where I grew up in. I'm not a Santhali, but I am a Jharkhandi for sure, and this is my little tribute to my home state. Thank you so much.